I was listening the other day to a podcast, and the ever interesting Professor Thurman was holding forth. And he said, this struck me as accurate. He said, sentient beings are actually, we're afraid a lot of the time. We can, we get around it in various ways, but because we are so intimately familiar with the experience of suffering, that the prospect of more life, let alone more lives, is sometimes quite intimidating. And so we feel a lot of fear. This kind of underscores the fact that most of us can't simply hear that the actual basis of our life is something quite different from what we have imagined. That the basis of not just our life, but everything is bliss and complete freedom and penetrating stainless light. There maybe have been a few people, for instance, our old friend, the sixth ancestor, maybe he just heard something, and the basis, the imagined basis of his life vanished, and the actual basis revealed itself. But most of us can't just sort of like hear that and sort of, oh yeah, right, silly me. Particularly after many kalpas of experience as a sentient being and feeling things rather differently. So even though sitting here together with you, we may actually sense that there really isn't any problem. This thing that we call life is ungraspable in a way that's freeing, it's actually liberating. But still, until the basis of our life, the genuine basis is clear to us, we may have some trepidation. The Buddha is often depicted as one of the gestures the Buddha makes is called the gesture of fearlessness. And this is one of Buddha's gifts to us. As a kind of fearlessness that's, I don't know how to say, beyond the fluctuating fears of our life. He reveals something like fearlessness as this body, this actual body, is fearlessness. And where we sit is a place of no fear. Even as the shimmering surface of our life, which so often catches our attention, maybe that feels like there's some fear or some problem, but Buddha gestures with his whole body, granting fearlessness, but actually pointing to our own fearlessness. Buddha can't give us anything really, but he can point to our own fearlessness as something that's inalienably ours. I resign myself to not necessarily saying stuff that's really convincing, but even so, the Buddha's pointing to this fearless body is a great, great gift. And so when we're we may find ourselves among sentient beings who are running around in circles, and they're all frightened and confused. The late abbot, the Reverend Zen Shin Whalen, had a mantra he liked to recite, and that was, when in danger, when in doubt, run in circles, scream and shout. And many sentient beings kind of operate on that basis. When they do, you can actually be there, and okay, you may feel a little rattled, but you can also bring your fearless body, the body of fearlessness, let's call it, into the situation. And people will suddenly find themselves sort of drawn in your direction. You don't have to do anything then. You can just stand there with the body of fearlessness and let beings collect around you, because you're reminding them of their body of fearlessness, which maybe nobody's told them about lately. And even if, as I say, you're a little rattled, things are a little freaky, still, this body is this body. So if circumstances call upon you in that way, then please don't hesitate. Professor Thurman also, he quoted the second Buddha, Nagarjuna, and I think the tantric folks, as we do, claim Nagarjuna as one of their lineage ancestors. And some people think that there were two Nagarjunas. There's the long ago one who's maybe second, maybe even first century. And then some centuries later there was another Nagarjuna who was a Tantrika guru. But Professor Thurman and the gang, they say, no, it's all same guy. So he quoted this quote that he mentioned, sounds like could have been the long ago Nagarjuna also. Nagarjuna in this case was characterizing emptiness. Which, of course, was his favorite topic. And he described it in 3 ways, which I thought was pretty cool. I hadn't actually heard this before. He says, in Sanskrit, he says, Shunyata eva bhiru bhishanam. That's one, which means emptiness is frightening to the timid. Shunyata eva bhiru bhishanam. And we knew that, I guess. And then he says, Shunyata eva bodhisadhanam. Emptiness is the sadhana, the ritual evocation of awakening. Ceremonial practice, if you like, of awakening. Which, by the way, is Zazen. And then he says, Shunyata eva karuna garbha. Shunyata, emptiness, is the very womb of compassion. This is pretty cool stuff, I thought. Spoken by the very master of emptiness. It's frightening to the timid, which is not you guys. It's the practice of awakening. And it's the womb of compassion. I do especially like that one, the bodhisadhanam, practice of awakening. And of course, maybe people might think it's strange to say, well, wait a minute, how is emptiness the womb of compassion? It's like, well, it's pretty easy in a way. Once the potent truth of shunyata, of emptiness, is powerfully there for us, then this body-mind is no more real than any other. Now, usually, very often anyway, we do have this little, Thurman calls it, he likes to call it the psychosis. We have this little psychosis that somehow we are number one. It's kind of how our life feels, right? Well, I'm number one, sure, absolutely. But once it's clear that the basis of everything is emptiness, everyone, every being, just the same. And then compassion for every being flows forth. No more sense of superiority or inferiority, for that matter. Everyone joined in the enormous heart. And that indeed becomes the womb of compassion. So this body of fearlessness, which is our body, and the teaching of emptiness, and the practice thereof, which is awakening. This is all we need for this and future lives without number. Which will be spent in the company of countless beings whom we can join in the practice of awakening and in the dynamic ocean of compassion, life after life after life. And then that fear because of all that suffering becomes insignificant. Emptiness, intimidating to the faint-hearted who haven't yet heard about their body of fearlessness. The practice of it is awakening, and it is the womb of compassion. That's an abundant teaching right there. And based on that, there's nothing much to do but go on and on and on. I think I said that in this year's death poem. We clergy people are supposed to write a death poem every year, so I'm just reminding some of y'all. Did you write one this year? Oh, it's a good practice. Yeah. Good practice. Looks like anyone can do it. It's good practice for anybody. And of course, 1 year, that will be the last. That's okay. Have any questions this morning? Yes.
What's the name of the podcast you're referring to?
Oh gosh. Thurman he's hundreds of them. But if you go on YouTube and search for one of his, it's something like, What is Reincarnated? I think it's that one.
What's the format of a death poem?
Any. Yes.
It seems like that there's a possibility that in the course of one's life, being confronted with various and sundry fears, that one could conceivably become rather skillful at arranging one's life to avoid said fears. And that seems like it's obviously a trap that one sort of sets for oneself in a way, because one of these days there's going to be something like imminent death or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, holy shit, I wasn't ready for that.
Right.
You know, because I've spent my entire life
Avoiding
fear.
Yeah.
But it's tricky. It seems tricky to me.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like almost a subtle difference sometimes of just you become sort of accustomed to your way of being, which is avoiding fear, so that you don't even know that that's what you're doing anymore. And you think, oh, life is calm and placid.
Yeah.
You know, it just goes on day by day.
Right.
Nothing to worry about.
Yes. Well, some people who can exercise usually like tremendous economic force can arrange their lives so that it kind of looks that way or works that way. But if you look around, pretty much all of them hit a wall at some point. And then the structures that they put in place in order to make their life feel perfectly placid all the time blow up. Sometimes it's not until their last moments when they realize, well, geez, I put all this stuff together and now it's all falling apart. So Buddha tells us, don't do that. Don't forget to take death as your advisor. Don't forget to contemplate the realities of death, so that death is like, a familiar companion. Don't wait until you have 3 minutes to manage your relationship to death. So most of us here don't have that kind of economic muscle, so we're safe in that regard.
I wasn't thinking so much about those sorts of arrangements. I was thinking more of like mental arrangements.
Right.
So even a person who lives with modest means can still set up a situation for themselves in a way.
I guess I haven't been able to do that. Not that I didn't try.
Well, there's a couple of things, I won't go into detail, that I've become rather skillful with avoiding.
Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah.
And so I don't go there.
All right.
Because it's a fearful place.
And may I ask, does that work for you?
Well, it seems to.
Seems to.
When I'm actually sort of forced to confront
Yeah.
the uncomfortable situation, then I realize that I've been sweeping it under the rug.
Right. Right. Well, a saving grace in that regard may be the practice of Zazen, because somebody, many years ago, I heard a Dharma talk, and somebody said he saw a cartoon in the New Yorker magazine, and it was this beautiful, perfect Japanese room with all these tatami mats. It's just basically an empty room in this beautiful Japanese house with a gorgeous garden. And then there's a guy sitting there, contemplating nature, perfect equanimity. And then behind him, you see there's a screen, folding screen. And behind the screen, there's all this junk, like broken bicycles, skateboards, skis, broken plumbing. And this guy said his experience of Zazen was, you sit down all calmly, the screen falls down, and all this crap starts rolling out. He said he felt like that was a good thing, that's what happens. So if we undertake the bodhisadhana, the practice of awakening called Zazen, this tendency to try to avoid stuff really gets blunted. So that's why I say it's a saving grace. Yes.
So it seems to me in my own life, I was taught a great many problem-solving techniques
Yes.
to get through ordinary conventional situations.
Right.
And in the process, I acquired a way of thinking and acting that prepared me to get through that type of stuff. But when talking about the death thing and other things,
The crunch.
those
crunch.
problem-solving devices just don't work.
Not so much, no.
Right. So I've conditioned myself in a way which really isn't adequate to address the death thing. And
So the conditioning that you're undergoing now with Zazen, that is very beneficial. So thank your karmic stars that you encountered that teaching. It will make a big difference. Yes? Go ahead.
I guess I was just going to comment for me. It's if I ever try and act out of a place of some concept of emptiness
Right.
out in the world, things go really funny.
Yeah.
So,
I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I think at least it's difficult for me to hear sometimes this kind of teaching and not think that I can go out in the world and sort of then be in a situation, engage in a contemplation, which then will like enact this sort of thing, like by like looking at some concept, like I have this thing, emptiness, whatever, and like how does that whatnot, and then at least to me, it's like it doesn't work.
You're right.
And I love that. I love the Book of Serenity. But
yes.
That I don't remember which case it is, but the one about Avalokiteshvara and the whole it's like adjusting.
Reaching
pillow
back for your pillow in the night.
In the night, like
right.
It's not this conscious.
Right, it's not. Right. If emptiness were, something you had to acquire, or if the body of fearlessness were something you had to acquire, that would be awkward. But it's already there. So, being in some situation as you are is sufficient. And if one has one sense of what that means, then the emotional valences that are going on are less compelling. And then if something needs to be done, you might actually be able to do it. But maybe there's nothing needing to be done other than you stand there and let beings, come up and bounce off of you, or cling to your pants leg and weep, whatever they want to do.
The question was also about emptiness. How is emptiness felt or experienced by a human? And then why does the mind react with fear to it?
Well, from the point of view of the sentient being, emptiness looks like our ultimate dissolution. So that's, a sentient being would tend to look at that and be intimidated. In terms of how you experience emptiness, well, that's kind of not so relevant. Various people have various experiences. Some people will cultivate in such a way that they will, at some point, have, or maybe it's better to say, return with a sense that there wasn't anything there at all, ever, anywhere. And then they may call that enlightenment. And usually if they do, they get into trouble. But it is possible. And mostly, if people practice Buddha Dharma consistently, something like that will occur in their life stream at some point. Maybe not exactly that, but something that Dogen called confirmation will happen. So I wouldn't worry about how am I going to experience emptiness. I would say continue with the bodhisattva, the practice thereof, practice of awakening, which is emptiness, and let that take care of itself. It's there's a celebrated book that, actually more than one, that's kind of full of stories of people who had various experiences. And I know that when I read that, for quite a few years, I kept thinking, well, I have to have something like that. And that's not true. So I kind of wish those books weren't quite so popular sometimes, because people come away thinking, well, I have to have something like that. Otherwise, I'm not practicing, or, my Dharma is insufficient. And that, of course, is not true. Okay. No fear anymore. We did want to have a very short ceremony after this, the memorial for Isan Dorsey, our founder. It'd be great if you could stay. It only takes a couple of minutes, and then join us for tea. So, would you be a celebrant? Thank you very much.